Hi, Sherry with Red Apple Auctions. Today I want to talk about hiring a band or DJ for your entertainment after the auction, or doing an afterglow party, or even doing a post party. All sorts of different elements that go into all of this. So let's first start off with a band. Why should you hire a band? When should you hire a band? Do you need a band? All this sort of thing. Well, the first thing about a band that you need to consider is, do you have a dancing crowd? Because if you have a dancing crowd, you can get them dancing through a DJ, which is less expensive, or a live band, which is more expensive. Now, the live band is generally going to offer you more panache. Yeah. Live music is generally has a higher element of sophistication, we'll say, than a DJ. So there is that piece of it. You may wish to have more of a perceived value to your event with the band. Now, the other piece of that is that consider your costs from a per person standpoint. So if you're really debating and you're like, geez, we've had a band in the past, should we consider the band in the future? One consideration is to look at your photos from the event, and usually at the very beginning is when you have the most people on the dance floor, or shortly thereafter. By the end of the evening, as people leave, there's fewer people there. So if you look at your time where you've got the most people on the dance floor and the cost of the band divided by the number of people that were actually dancing at the very peak of the night, you might be a little surprised at the per person cost to have that band there. I'm not against bands by any means. I like good bands. We've got some great ones here in the DC area that I really enjoyed listening to. Heard one last week, Onyx. We were down at Hamilton Live. If you've got about 300 people, that was a really nice venue for my DC folks out there. But there's some great bands out there, and so I'm not wanting to discount any of those. I'm just trying to give you some pointers here as you try to pull together your budget, where you put your money. So the live band, more panache, and if you've got a dancing crowd. Now, who's a dancing crowd? Well, if you're doing this event for the very first time, you may not know if you've got a dancing crowd, but I can tell you that generally speaking, when I look at my school auctions, I will have more dancing crowds in the PK through 8th grade schools than I do in the high school groups. And I think that's because those younger parents, they're like, woo, got rid of the kids for the night. We got the babysitter. We're going to have fun. And maybe by the time they're older and they've got teenagers and high school kids, they're like, yeah, I just want to go home. So that's generally a very vague, or it's a specific rule of thumb, but it may not hold true for you. But that's one way of considering whether or not you've got a dancing room. The other consideration is, what's the general age of your population? If you've got an older crowd, I can tell you that most of them, they don't even like the auction because it's hard for them to hear sometimes and distinguish the noise from a conversation. So you add a band with instruments, it gets even worse. So if you've got an older crowd and you want to carry the conversation forward after the event, a band is not a good way to do that, nor is a DJ for that matter. It's really going to be an afterglow party. We'll get to those in a second. Now, when else might you want to hire a band? Well, if you've got it sponsored, if you've got the band underwritten or sponsored, then you probably are okay hiring the band. Why? Because I know you're making more money on the sponsorship than what the band is charging you. So in that sense, it might be worthwhile to move forward because you've got it underwritten, and there might be some real sponsorship benefits that are specific to that sponsor paying for the band that you want to fulfill for that person. So for that company or person. So that would be another example. And a third reason, and this is really far down on the list. I mean, I hesitate to even mention this, but I guess it could be a conceivable possibility. If you are a smaller group, like 150 people, maybe 200, and you want to have live music, then it's not unusual for me to have that as my sound system for doing the auction. And if you don't want to pay or can't pay for a separate audio system for the spoken bits of the evening, like the auctioneer and the MC and all that, then chances are I am using the band or DJ sound. I'm thinking back to earlier this year in Atlanta, they had a smaller group like this, and they had a guitarist with a sound system, and that's the sound system that I was using that night. They didn't have, in that particular venue, a different sound system. That was what we used. So I suppose if you're looking for double duty here, I'm not getting on a plane and hauling a sound system around the country, so I'm going to be using whatever sound system is there on site, and that in that case and in other cases, it has been where they have me use the sound system that the musician or the band is using. So that could be an option. Now, there's all kinds of reasons why that sound system is not ideal for an auction, but for a smaller group, it can usually work. I'm going to just conclude kind of the band portion versus Afterglow versus post parties with the fact that it has nothing to do with the amount of money that you raise as to whether or not you should hire a band. I've got events that raise over $1 million. They're not using a band. So it's not like once you get to $300,000 or $600,000 and you're a gala, you're like, oh, we got to have a band. No, it has nothing to do with that. What I see is most of the time it's driven by the gala chairs. The gala chairs want a live band, they get a live band. That's usually where I see this stemming from. Let's talk about Afterglow parties. Now, I really like Afterglow parties. You can call them whatever you want. Maybe it is, there's a gentler name, but I think Afterglow is just such a nice, fun name for really what happens. And in those cases, after the program ends, the formal program, we invite guests into another space. Usually that is in a different room. I have seen it before where it's the same room, but they kind of separate it with like stanchions or curtains and so forth. So they invite people back into the space. It's been even where it's formerly the area that was the silent auction now becomes the area for the Afterglow party. Afterglow parties, I generally do not see an extra charge for. It's just a continuation of the evening, and people are invited over there for usually sweets. They've got some sort of desserts. They have drinks there. It's oftentimes coffee-based, alcoholic-based coffee drinks that are usually there. One great one, in fact, I'm going to see if I can find the video and include some of this while I'm talking about it. Out in Arizona, they had a flaming coffee bar that was incredibly popular. So they had cigars and flaming coffee out on the terrace so that everybody could join them out there if they so choose. And it was a flaming coffee, so people got to choose that. It was a lot of fun. You put different toppings on it. It reminded me, one time I was at the Kimpton in Denver, I think it was, and when in the morning, when you went down for the coffee bar, which was like free in the lobby, they had like little chocolate chips you could put on it, and you could sweeten up your morning coffee with whipped cream and all these different fun things. And it kind of reminded me of that a little bit when I was out in Arizona. So that is an option, right? You've got something unique in the Afterglow party. It's not a cost associated with it. It's just a time for the development team to be able to go and thank the big donors there that night, check in with people. It's not noisy, so people can easily visit. At the most, what I will see is there'll be maybe one or two, maybe three people that are like a little jazz combo that's playing in the background, but it's not meant to be loud. It's just background music. But a lot of the Afterglow parties I see don't even have that. So that's just another option. It's kind of a nice way to end the evening. I think it's not as abrupt as doing like, okay, thank you for coming. Get out of here. You know, it's a softer way to end the evening. So I do like Afterglow parties. I feel that they're a nice touch. Kind of elevates the event without necessarily adding all that much cost to it. You know, you can even have, like hot chocolate there. You wouldn't have to serve alcohol. You could just have hot chocolate. If you didn't want to keep the bar open, that could be something too. So it's just coffee and hot chocolate, something like that, you know? All right. So then there's post parties. Now, 5 years ago, I had gone out, I was out in Oregon, and Kelly Russell, auctioneer out there, was doing a whole bunch of really more professional videos than what I'm doing here for sure. And she had said, well, hey, you're coming out, why don't we get together and you can talk about post parties that you see on the East Coast versus what we see here on the West Coast. I'm going to include a link to that video right now, and I think it's particularly timely because just this week, Kelly released a book. She wrote a book on benefit auctions. I haven't bought it yet, so I haven't seen it or anything like that, but I'm more than happy to plug her book. So if you want to go to Amazon and get that, then certainly I'm sure it's a great book. She's been an auctioneer for a long time, and I think she just moved. I haven't checked in with her for a while. Life. I'm going to include a link to that video that talked about post parties. What she talked about at that time is that in Oregon, what she was seeing is that these post parties were held off-site. So the people could continue to clean up the event, the committee could, but the post party was taking place at a bar, and the idea was that 20% of the proceeds of the bar were going back to the nonprofit. That's pretty cool. You know, that's a pretty cool way of doing it. So that might be a fun way to do it. But what I see here, like earlier this spring, for the very first time I saw a post party with a school auction. This is a younger crowd, the kind of the PK through 8th grade, and they had a $75 post party. It was held in a different room of the hotel. It included music. It was like the continuation of the party up until like 1 a.m. or 1:30 or something like that. And they had a good turnout for that. Now they've got a pretty tight group over there, so that might not fly for you, but I could see it working more for a school auction. I've seen it also, I should say this, I've seen it also for some of my nonprofit events that are trying to do young professionals and bring in young professionals. Just recently, I wrapped up an event for a large auction, and they do, or I should say a large gala. It's relatively a small auction, but it's a large gala. And they have the young professionals sort of start arriving. They pay a discounted ticket, and then they arrive as the program of the evening is ending. So auction, Fund and Needs wrapping up, band is starting. That's when the young professionals come. So it's almost like a post party, but it's only a post party for the young professionals because everybody else, their ticket price got them into it, right? So a traditional post party, as I think about it, is you're actually charging a separate fee to go to this post party. Again, Kelly was saying out in the West Coast, they do it off site. What I generally see here in the East Coast is they do it on site, but you know, it just depends on your event and what you want to try. So those are the kind of the overview of those 3 elements, and hopefully gave you some ideas. If you're getting value out of these videos, hey, please hit like or subscribe or share the video. We've got so many ways that we can improve auctions out there, but unless the word gets out, then nobody's going to be able to take the advice and run with it. So if you know somebody who would benefit from this content, I would really appreciate it if you would share this with them, either publicly or privately. Okay? Thanks for watching.